When I won first place in a statewide math competition, my parents said, "Good job," and that was it. But when my brother got an honorable mention in a local soccer game, they threw a party so big the whole neighborhood came. That was the moment I realized I was never going to be the favorite. But what I did years later, at his graduation, left the entire room in silence. Meanwhile, Nathan, he only had to breathe right, and he was treated like Einstein. I began to wonder, seriously wonder, if I'd been switched at birth. Because I couldn't shake this feeling that I simply didn't belong. Living in the shadows, my name is Sierra. I'm 27 years old, and I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm the oldest in a family of 4. Just me, my parents, and my younger brother Nathan, who's 3 years younger. On the outside, we look like your typical suburban family. A 2-story wooden house, white picket fence, and a tiny backyard garden overflowing with lavender that my mom planted every spring. But what happened behind that door? That's where the truth lived. That's where I learned how to survive by staying silent. Because no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I was always just a blurred outline in the background. A faint shadow in a home where the spotlight was always, without fail, reserved for Nathan. The moment I knew, I started noticing the difference early. I must have been in 2nd grade, still young enough to believe that love was something you earned. That week, I had been chosen to recite a poem at our school's annual celebration. I spent days practicing, rewriting every line, every verse, pouring my little heart into it. Even my teacher said it was mature beyond my age. I came home that afternoon, bursting with excitement, gripping the crumpled paper in my tiny hands. "Mom," I said, "guess what? I'm going to be on stage." She barely glanced up from the kitchen sink. "Oh, huh, that's fine," she muttered. Then added without a second thought, "Don't forget to bring in Nathan's shoes from the porch. It's going to rain." I stood there frozen, still clutching that poem like it was gold, while her words slammed into me like cold air. My moment, my proud little moment, brushed aside for a pair of muddy sneakers. 2nd class in my own home, Nathan was always different. Always the golden one. Always the reason for someone's proud smile. The year he made it onto the junior varsity soccer team. Not varsity, just junior. My parents went around bragging like he'd been recruited to the Olympics. They bought him a brand new pair of Adidas cleats. Almost $200. Meanwhile, I was still walking the halls of my high school with a hand-me-down backpack. Frayed straps, a broken zipper, something a cousin had outgrown. I never had a proper birthday party. The last time I blew out candles, I was 10. And even then, the cake was a discounted one from the grocery store, half-frosted and a day old. But when Nathan turned 13, Centennial Park, tents, balloons, a feast that could feed a small army, over 30 guests, laughter everywhere. And me? I stood quietly in the corner, taking pictures on my phone. At one point, I overheard my mom talking to a friend. "He deserves it all," she said with pride. "He always brings joy to this family." Joy. No one ever asked how I felt. No one ever wondered if I was okay. Not once. The invisible one, did anyone ever ask if I was okay? I did my homework alone every single night. No one sat beside me. No one checked my work. Meanwhile, Nathan had Mom by his side, walking him through every math problem, line by line. She'd smile at him, praise him, and hand him a scoop of vanilla ice cream when he finished. But me? I studied in silence, taught myself, fought to get on the honor roll. And when I did, a couple of empty nods. No words, no celebration, just silence. In high school, I got a perfect score in science. I was nominated for the prestigious STEM program at the University of Minnesota. I was thrilled, really genuinely thrilled. I even printed out the invitation letter and walked into the living room with it, hoping, just hoping, maybe this time they'd be proud. Dad looked up from the TV for maybe 3 seconds, then shrugged and said, "Well, do whatever you want. Just don't fall behind on your chores." Mom gave me a tight, forced smile. "Studying's good," she said, "but don't get too carried away. Remember, you're a girl. Someday you'll have a family of your own to take care of." And just like that, my achievement meant nothing. Again, the weight of being forgotten, I lost track of how many words I swallowed back. How many times I stayed silent just to keep the peace. Every morning, Nathan got a ride to school. I biked through snow, through wind, through freezing rain. I told myself, it's fine. Every time I curled up with stomach cramps, Mom brushed it off. "Stop exaggerating," she'd say. But when Nathan sneezed, she was there in seconds, with hot lemon tea and a warm towel for his head. I used to tell myself, she must have just forgotten. But deep down, I knew the truth. She didn't forget. She just didn't care. My entire childhood felt like being trapped in a math problem, where no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many steps I showed, I was always the wrong answer. I tried to be the perfect daughter. Obedient, studious, never caused trouble, always tried harder. But none of it mattered, because I wasn't Nathan. And over time, I realized it was never about who worked harder. It was about who they chose. And they didn't choose me. The day that should have meant everything, I still remember that afternoon. every second of it. It was early May. The skies above were gray, heavy with clouds, but inside me, my heart was glowing, because I had just graduated summa cum laude in economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. For years of relentless study, 3 part-time jobs, 2 emotional breakdowns when I almost lost my scholarship, and only 1 phone call from my mother during the entire journey. But I made it, and all of it led to this moment. I played out in my head so many times, maybe a hug, maybe the words, "Sierra, we're proud of you." I didn't need gifts. I didn't need a banner. Just acknowledgement. My parents arrived nearly an hour late. Not because of traffic, but because they stopped to buy a discounted bouquet of tulips from the grocery store near campus. The petals were wilted. The plastic wrap was crinkled. But my mom beamed like she was holding pure gold. "I thought yellow looked nice on you," she said. "See, it even has a bow." I looked down at my worn-out shoes, the dress I'd borrowed from my roommate, and all I could do was whisper, "Thanks, Mom." The price of being invisible after the ceremony. I turned to them, hope still flickering in my voice. "Maybe we could go out to eat? There's a little Italian place nearby. It's really nice." Dad didn't even lift his head fully from his phone. He just asked flatly, "You paying?" I didn't answer. They didn't ask what I wanted. They didn't talk about it. They just walked to the car, slid into their seats, and waited for me to drive them. So I did. We sat down at that restaurant. I ordered lasagna. They ordered whatever they wanted. And when the bill came, $120. I paid, using the money I'd saved up for months, working late shifts at the campus library. Not a single thank you. Not a single "we're proud of you." Just my father casually mentioning, "You should really learn how to eat more frugally." I gave a small, tight smile. Then I picked up my fork and cut into the lasagna as my stomach churned with something far too familiar, bitterness. That day, as I chewed my food in silence, I made myself a quiet promise. I will never expect anything from them again. The Golden Boy celebration, but that promise I made to myself, to stop expecting anything from them, it didn't hold. It crumbled 2 years later when Nathan graduated. By then, I was working full-time as a financial analyst at a private firm in St. Paul. It was a Thursday morning. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. "Nathan's graduation party. Tonight, 6 p.m. Stone Creek Restaurant. Don't be late. Bring a gift. No invitation. No call. Not even question if I was free. Just a command." I stood in my kitchen, reading the message again and again, and my chest tightened. Because I remembered. I remembered that quiet dinner on my graduation night. The one where I paid the bill. The one where my father told me to be frugal. The one where no one said the words, "We're proud of you." And here was again. Another grand event. Another celebration for the Golden Boy. And me? Once again, I was just a background extra, expected to show up, stay quiet, and give. A guest in my own family, I didn't respond to her text. But that evening, I still went. Because somewhere, buried deep beneath the resentment, I was still his sister. I'd even gone out of my way, ordered a brand new iPad Pro, over $1,300, had it gift wrapped and arranged for delivery straight to the restaurant. I walked into Stone Creek, a place I'd passed 100 times but never stepped into. Even though my office was just a few blocks away. The sight inside stopped me cold. Crystal chandeliers. Long tables draped in white linen. Over 60 guests. Laughing, hugging, snapping photos. At the center of it all, a towering 3-tier cake, frosted in deep navy blue, Nathan's favorite color. I stood near the entrance like a stranger at a wedding I hadn't been invited to. Every person was being greeted with warmth and cheer. Except me. I quietly approached the server and asked, "Is there a seat available?" He checked the list, then shook his head. Everything's been reserved. But I could see clearly there were still seats. One of them, right next to Nathan, was completely empty. I took a few steps toward it, only to be blocked by my mother. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "That seat's for Jason, Nathan's best friend. He's just running a little late." I gave a small, tight smile. "So, Jason gets a seat of honor, even when he's late. But me?" Before I could finish the thought, she cut me off. "Well, did you at least bring a gift?" Her voice dropped lower. "Because if not, it's better you don't embarrass the family." The gift I took back, I felt the lump rising in my throat. But I swallowed it. Hard. Just then my phone buzzed. A message from the delivery driver. "I'm outside with the iPad order for Nathan. Should I bring it in?" I took a long, deep breath. And then, loud enough for the entire room to hear, I said, "Yes, bring it in." The room fell into silence. Conversations faded. Forks hovered midair. Every eye turned toward the entrance as the delivery man walked in, holding a silver-wrapped gift box, neatly tied with a bow. I stepped forward with a calm smile. "Nathan," I said, "this is your graduation gift." An iPad pull. Gasps floated through the room. Nathan's jaw dropped. His eyes sparkled. I caught my mother leaning in to whisper to a distant cousin. "See? I knew she wouldn't come empty-handed." I heard every word, and it wasn't pride in her voice. It was smug satisfaction, as if my generosity had proven her right. But I didn't smile out of joy. I smiled because I had already made a decision. I looked at Nathan, then turned to the delivery man. I'm sorry. I've changed my mind. I'd like to cancel the order. The entire room froze. My mother froze. Nathan looked like someone had poured ice water down his back. The delivery man blinked, slightly confused, but stayed professional. There's a 5% cancellation fee. The rest will be refunded within 5 business days. I nodded without hesitation. That's fine. Then I turned around and walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence. Because I finally understood, I didn't need a seat at their table. And I definitely didn't need to buy a place in a family that never made space for me to begin with. No seat, no voice, no more I used to think I'd grown numb to being overlooked, that I had built up some kind of armor. But standing there, in a room filled with white linen and laughter, treated like a stranger in my own family, every layer of strength I had built began to crack. No one asked if I had eaten. No one saved me a seat. The only thing they asked was, where's the gift? I was still holding my phone when the delivery man walked in, carrying that silver-wrapped box like it held the world. The room went still. So quiet, it felt like time had paused. All eyes were on me, on the expensive gift, the $1,300 iPad Pro I once thought could rewrite history. That maybe, just maybe, it could become a memory worth keeping. I looked at Nathan, and I said it clearly, so no one would miss a word. This is your graduation gift. His eyes lit up. Really, he asked, stunned. You got this for me? My mother smiled like a queen watching her loyal subject return. She leaned toward a relative and whispered, see? No matter how upset she gets, she always remembers her place. She just pretends to be cold. I looked at her, then at my father, who nodded slowly, as if I'd finally made him proud. Like I had finally behaved. And that's when I turned back to the delivery man. I'd like to cancel the order. He blinked. Sorry, cancel the order? My voice didn't waver. Yes, cancel the gift. I don't want to give it anymore. Silence swept the room again, a thick, stunned silence. The only sound came from the far end of the table, silverware clinking gently against porcelain. The delivery man pulled out his phone and made the call. A few minutes later, he returned. There's a 5% cancellation fee. The rest will be refunded within 3 to 5 business days. Perfect, I said. Thank you. He nodded politely and left. And I stood there, facing a room full of shocked stares, some angry, some confused, but not one of them truly surprised. Because deep down, they knew what they had done. Nathan slammed his hand on the table. His voice cut through the air. Are you crazy? You just wanted to humiliate me, didn't you? I looked at him. This brother who'd been protected like he was made of glass. Who had never tasted rejection. Never once had to wonder if he mattered. I spoke calmly. You already have a party. Over 60 guests. A 3-tier cake. If you can't handle not getting a gift from me, then maybe the problem isn't the gift. Maybe the problem is you. No more silence. My dad stood up abruptly, his face flushed red with anger. Sierra, what do you think you're doing? Do you really think making a scene like this is going to get you anything? Before I could answer, my mom jumped in, her voice sharp, no longer hiding behind sweetness. You're being unbelievable. All you had to do was bring a gift and sit down for a meal like a normal person. I turned and looked her in the eyes, calm, unwavering. Normal? I asked. Like my graduation day, when you brought wilted flowers and made me pay for dinner with the little money I had left. Normal like today, when I wasn't even offered a chair at the table. But Nathan's friend, who didn't even show up on time, still had one waiting. Not a single word came in response. No denial, no apology, just a heavy silence. A silence so thick, you could almost hear it breathing, as if I had shattered the illusion they worked so hard to maintain. I turned my back to them and took a step toward the door. And then, I said it clearly, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. If I don't have a seat at this table, then I have no reason to buy a gift for someone who's never once shared a seat with me. And I walked away. No ruse, no second glance, just the soft click of my heels against the floor and the sound of family performance falling apart behind me. Finally, silence. I didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, I drove, no destination in mind, until I found myself at a small cafe on the outskirts of AITA. The same place I'd always gone when I needed to vanish. When I needed the world to stop spinning for a while. The shop was still open. Soft amber lights poured onto the old wooden floors, casting shadows that didn't feel heavy, just familiar. I ordered an iced espresso, found a quiet table in the far corner, and sat down like someone who had just dropped a mountain they'd been carrying for years. The music was soft, floating gently through the air, and the scent of roasted coffee beans wrapped around me like a warm blanket I didn't know I needed. I didn't feel regret, not even for a second. I knew they were probably furious. I knew voices would be raised that night. Fingers pointed, blame passed like a game of hot potato. But I also knew this was just the beginning, because that night I didn't just walk away from a party. I walked away from the role they gave me when I was too young to even know I had a choice. The quiet daughter, the polite one, the responsible one, the one who stayed silent while everyone else spoke for her. For the first time in my life, I did something they never expected. I chose me, and that feeling, it wasn't rebellious. It wasn't selfish. It was freeing. The price of speaking up, I got back to my apartment around 11 p.m. after 3 hours at the cafe, just letting my pulse settle, letting my voice, my choice, finally echo back to me in peace. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd wait until morning. But when I opened the door, the lights were still on. My mother was sitting on the couch, arms crossed. Her stare could cut glass. My father stood by the fireplace, his arms folded tight, like someone had just delivered the worst news of his life. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when my mom fired the first shot. So, you finally decided to come home. I set my bag down quietly, took off my coat. I thought you'd be asleep, I said gently. My father scoffed, a short, bitter laugh. After the circus you pulled tonight, embarrassing the whole family in front of relatives and friends, and now you just walk in here like nothing happened? I sat down on the edge of the couch, my hands folded in my lap. I kept my voice steady. If you call that a circus, I said, then maybe it's time we stop pretending. I'm done. I'm done playing along with this show you call family. The cost of their silence, my mom didn't even try to hide her intentions. She folded her arms tighter and said flatly, the party tonight cost $4,600. We think the least you can do is pay half. I blinked, stunned. Wait, you want me to pay $2,300? She nodded. Consider it compensation for the iPad you canceled. I let out a laugh, not out of humor, but disbelief. So let me get this straight. I was insulted the moment I walked in, given no seat, subtly told I wasn't welcome at my own brother's table, and now I'm supposed to foot the bill for a dinner I didn't even eat? My dad's voice turned hard, defensive. You're his sister. You should feel responsible for your brother. He was looking forward to that gift. You ruined his night. I clenched my hands so tight my knuckles turned white. Do you even remember my graduation night? I asked. No party. No cake. No congratulations. No who. I paid $120 for a meal that none of you appreciated. While I was eating instant noodles in my dorm room and skipping meals to make rent, my mom raised an eyebrow, her tone cold. You were already earning money back then, weren't you? You had a part-time job. Nathan had nothing. I nodded slowly. Yes, I earned money. I got scholarships. I worked 3 jobs at once because I knew no one was coming to save me, and because I could take care of myself. You used that as an excuse to never even try. I'm not your sacrifice, I turned to my father. He usually stayed quiet, letting my mother lead every confrontation. But this time he spoke, his voice heavy, almost like an order. Family is about supporting each other, he said. If you earn more, then sharing is the right thing to do. I stood up. I wasn't holding back anymore. Support? Sharing? Where was that when I was sick, making soup for myself because no one checked on me? Where was the family then? Where was the support when my birthday passed like any other day? While Nathan got barbecues, balloons, and backyard parties. You don't ask. You just expect. You demand. And never once did you stop to ask if I even had anything left to give. My mother rose from the couch, eyes sharp, voice shrill. You're selfish. If you can't even be considerate toward your own brother, how do you expect to survive out there in the real world? I looked at her straight in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. It's not that I won't give, I said. It's that I've been giving my entire life. And today, for once, I stopped. And just like that, you call me selfish. I'm done explaining. The room went silent. But it wasn't the kind of silence that comes from reflection or guilt. It was the kind you hear right before something breaks. And my father broke it. If you're not willing to help, he snapped, then stop freeloading in this house. I gave a small, cold smile. I pay you $1,000 a month, I said, to live in this old house with no central air, walls so thin I can hear the neighbors cough. If you want me gone, fine, I'll go. My mom blinked, caught off guard for once. Sierra, don't overreact. Things can still be worked out if you just try to be a little more flexible. I shook my head. It's not about being stubborn. It's about finally saying enough. If every apology has to be followed by an invoice, if love always comes with a receipt, then that's not a family. It's a business transaction. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned a screen toward them. I'm not paying the $2,300. Not today. Not ever. My father slammed his hand on the table. His voice thundered through the room. Then get out of my house. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned and walked toward my room. Because in that moment, something became very clear. They had just made the decision for me. I wasn't leaving to punish them. I was leaving because it was finally time to live on my own terms. Packing peace the next morning, I began to pack. No tears. No hesitation. Just quiet focus. One item after another. Clothes. Important documents. Essentials. I folded everything carefully, placing them into 2 suitcases. That's all I had. That's all I needed. Most of my life, I'd learned to live light, unattached, unburdened. Maybe because deep down, I never truly believed home was a place I was meant to stay. I had just zipped up the second suitcase when I heard a knock, but she didn't wait. My mom walked right in. Sierra, your dad was a little harsh last night, but you're calm now, right? I didn't look up. I didn't play polite. Say what you came to say. I'm Busse. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed, like she was preparing for a negotiation. Your car, the black Honda. Your dad and I were thinking, maybe you could let Nathan borrow it for a while. He needs it for job interviews. Just a few months. You're already working. You don't need it urgently. I stood up straight and laughed, not out of humor, but because even now, she didn't get it. Borrow it, I asked. I worked and saved for 8 months to buy that car on my own. No loans, no help, no favors. If Nathan needs a car, I said, he can buy it for me. I'm willing to sell at a fair price. I'm not the backup plan. My mother's eyes widened, like I had just committed some kind of family crime. You're going to charge your own brother for a car? She asked, offended, almost insulted. No, Olivia, I'm going to charge someone for my car. And if you want to talk about family, then fairness starts with not treating me like an ATM with feelings. I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. My father appeared at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. That's too much, Sierra. I didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't soften. What's too much, I said, is you always using he has nothing as an excuse to make me give up everything. I've stayed silent long enough. He stepped forward, pointing a finger like a judge delivering a sentence. If you feel like no one respects you in this house, he said, then get out. I stood still. No fear. No tears. Just a slow, quiet nod. All right, I said. I'll go. And this time, I'm not coming back. Walking out, standing tall, I picked up my 2 suitcases, the sum of everything I owned, and walked down the stairs. My father said nothing. Not a word. Not even a glance. My mother, still clinging to control, called after me. You can't live alone forever. When you need help, don't expect anyone to be there. I paused at the bottom step. Didn't turn around. Didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. And I said, calmly, if the price of being helped is giving up my self-respect, then I'd rather face the world completely alone. I opened the door, rolled my suitcase out onto the front porch. No one followed. No one called my name. No final bouvier. No wish of luck. Just the sharp, heavy sound of the front door slamming shut behind me, like the last period on a sentence that took 26 years to write. And just like that, I was free. A room of my own. I rented a small room at a roadside motel in Bloomington. $580 a month. Noisy heater. Dim lighting. A rust-stained sink. Not comfortable. Not beautiful. But it was mine. A place where no one could barge in, ask for money, or demand the car I worked so hard to buy. I finally exhaled. I started making plans to change jobs. My office was too far now, and besides, I needed a clean break. No shared address. No place they could drop by uninvited. No more chances for guilt to find me at my doorstep. Just a few days after I left, my phone rang. Nathan. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 5 times. Then I picked up. What you did, he said, was too much. Mom and Dad are really mad. I leaned back against the motel wall, the paint peeling behind me. My voice was calm, almost airy. They're mad because they didn't get the car, right? Silence. Then, softer. You know I need it for job interviews. Why do you have to make everything a big deal? I closed my eyes and let out the smallest laugh. Not mean. Not bitter. Just done. Nathan, you had an entire graduation party that cost nearly $5,000. You've been handed excuses your whole life. Praise for trying. Forgiven when you failed. This car? It's the one thing I worked for by myself. And I'm keeping it. No matter what. He didn't say a word. Just silence. I hung up. I knew exactly where that call would go. Straight to my mother. And I also knew the real battle was just beginning. Relearning quiet the next morning, I woke up in a cheap motel room. Thin curtains fluttering with sunlight. Unable to block the brightness pouring through the cracks. No more stomping footsteps upstairs. No shouting from the kitchen. No invisible weight pressing down on my chest as I walked down creaking stairs, unsure of what mood I'd face. Just silence. Cold, yes. Imperfect, yes. But strangely, I felt more at peace than I ever had before. The motel was in the South Loop area, near the I-35W freeway. Rundown. Damp. The kind of place people leave reviews with 1 star and a warning. $70 a night. Stained carpet. A bathroom sink that groaned when you turned the handle. But here, no one had a spare key. No one could burst in asking for money, or control, or sacrifice. I spent the first 2 days doing almost nothing. Just sleeping. Eating cup noodles. Not speaking. No social media. No calls. No explanations. Each night, I turned off my phone like I was flipping off the rest of the world. Because I needed to disappear for a little while. Not forever. just long enough to remember what it felt like to belong to myself again. Before I could plant new roots, I had to clear the ground where I used to bury all my needs. Starting from the floor up by the third day, I started looking for an apartment. I wasn't searching for luxury, just a small kitchen, some working heat, and a space quiet enough that I could finally breathe without feeling like I owed the air to someone else. After 12 phone calls and 5 apartment viewings that smelled like dust and disappointment, I found it. A 1-bedroom unit in West St. Paul. $500 a month. Utilities included. No elevador. No glamour. The hardwood floors were warped. The white walls had faded into a soft, tired cream. But the window looked out over a sunlit stretch of open grass. Nothing but sky and quiet. I stood in the middle of that empty room, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. And for the first time in my life, I whispered out loud, "This is my home." I moved in the very next day. No furniture, no wall art, no noise, just 2 suitcases, an air mattress I rushed to buy from Target, and a plastic folding table I carried up the stairs myself. It didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. Every single item I brought in had one purpose. I chose it, not to please anyone, not to prove anything, not to earn love or approval, just because I wanted it. And that was enough. A life I chose. It took me almost a week to settle in. I scrubbed the baseboards, retaped the peeling edges of the walls, replaced the dusty curtains with soft ones I liked, pale gray with tiny specks of gold, bought a small bookshelf from the thrift store down the block, and built it while soft music played in the background. And then I placed a pot of lavender on the windowsill. The scent hit me immediately. It reminded me of our backyard growing up, but this time, it wasn't soaked in bitterness. It just smelled like peace. I started learning how to live alone from scratch, setting my own alarm, making breakfast when I felt like it, fried eggs and toast, simple and warm, and choosing every single morning whether I wanted silence or connection. There was no one to answer to. I contacted my job, asked to adjust my remote schedule, paused all the extra side projects I used to take on just to earn more. I didn't need to overachieve anymore. I didn't need to prove my worth in invoices or exhaustion. Now I worked enough to cover my bills, keep the lights on, and breathe. Every dollar I earned, it was mine. I wasn't anyone's safety net. I wasn't a financial fallback. I wasn't a silent provider, expected to give endlessly and ask for nothing. I was free. And for the first time in my life, that freedom had a zip code, a quiet window, and lavender in bloom. Joy without permission at night. I read books again. The kind I used to put back on the shelf because I didn't want to hear, "That's a waste of money." Now I bought them without guilt. And I read them slowly, savoring every sentence like it was a reward. I watched old movies on my laptop, wrapped in a secondhand blanket, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor. And when something made me laugh, I laughed. Out loud, without shrinking, without someone telling me to quiet down, because girls aren't supposed to be loud. I started writing in a journal. Not for anyone else, just for me. Sometimes I wrote letters to the girl I used to be, the 10-year-old version of myself who waited for applause that never came. I'd write, "We made it out. You don't have to try so hard anymore." And somewhere in between those pages, I started to forgive. Not because they apologized, not because they deserved it, but because I didn't want to bring their anger into this new space. Every time I went grocery shopping, I didn't hear anyone asking, "Did you remember to get something for Nathan?" Every time I turned off my phone at 10 p.m., there was no voice yelling from down the hall, "Sierra, don't forget to drive your brother in the morning." That silence? It wasn't empty. It was full of relief. I had broken the cycle. The endless loop of invisible work, of unspoken sacrifice, of never being enough. And now, I was finally, beautifully free to just live. A life that feels light 6 weeks after I left. An email landed in my inbox. No greeting. No apology. Just one dry sentence from Nathan. "How are you doing? I need to borrow some money." I didn't get angry. I didn't even roll my eyes. I just clicked archive and shut the laptop. Then I turned toward the window. The lavender pot on my sill was in full bloom, deep purple, almost glowing in the soft golden light of a late afternoon. There was no one behind me asking what I had to give. No voice telling me to bend, to adjust, to dim myself for someone else's comfort. Just me, and this space, and a stillness I'd never had growing up. I took a long, slow breath. And for the first time in 26 years, freedom didn't feel like a fantasy or a rebellion or a moment I'd have to give back. It felt real. It smelled like fresh coffee in the morning. It tasted like silence with no obligation. It sounded like soft jazz echoing across bare walls in an apartment no one else had the key to but me. The house they chose, I wasn't surprised when they came back. What surprised me was that it took them 3 months. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in my usual cafe, the one near my apartment with the warm corner seat by the window, a dark roast in hand, soft music humming through the air like background peace. My phone lit up. My mother's name. My chest tensed, not from fear but memory. old reflexes that hadn't completely faded. I answered. Her voice was sugar-coated, too sweet to be real. Sierra, I miss you. It's been a while. Are you doing okay? I didn't answer right away. Every word felt like a spoonful of honey disguising medicine I'd swallowed before. Too many times. So I asked flatly, what do you want? She hesitated, just for a second. Then, in that same casual tone you'd use when asking someone to pick up eggs, she said, well, your dad, Nathan, and we were hoping to see you. There's something we need to talk about. You know, family stuff. I said yes. Not because I was ready to reconcile. Not because I missed them. But because I already knew what this was. They needed something. We met the following Monday at a small Italian restaurant downtown. I arrived on time. My mother was dressed in a new sweater, her hair carefully curled. My father had already ordered a drink, looking like a man who thought he was doing me a favor by being there. And Nathan? Still playing the role of the golden child, but now in a dress shirt and tie. Trying to look grown up, but still sheltered behind their hopes. I pulled out my chair. I didn't smile. I didn't speak first. I waited, because I already knew this table wasn't about reconciliation. It was about what they wanted next. Part 29. The deal they didn't expect. Nathan sat across from me, buttoned up in a new dress shirt and a tie that still had the creases from the package. Trying to look responsible. Trying to look like something he hadn't earned. I sat down. No greetings. No smile. Just silence. My father cleared his throat, glanced at my mother, then turned toward me. His voice was low, gravelly, but trying hard to sound composed. Nathan has a business idea. A modern cafe, open concept, live music, handcrafted pastries. We were thinking, maybe you could loan him $50,000. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Loan? I asked. Or just give it to him. No one answered, because we all knew the truth. I turned to Nathan. Do you have any experience in business? Management? Finance? He gave a sheepish grin, like a child asking for allowance. I'm passionate, he said, about a plan. If you just help me with the capital, I can get it going. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table, and I looked at each of them, one by one. All right, I said, you want $50,000? I'll lend it. No interest. Their eyes lit up, like children who had just been told yes. But I wasn't done. One condition, I said. They all leaned in. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Mom and Dad will sign a formal loan agreement and put the house up as collateral. If Nathan doesn't pay the loan back in 12 months, the house becomes mine. The room dropped 10 degrees, like someone had shut off the heat, because for the first time, they realized the rules had changed. The terms are mine now. The room went cold, like someone had opened a window in the middle of a Minnesota winter. The warmth drained in seconds. My father set his glass down slowly, his fingers tightening around the stem as if he were holding in something violent. His voice dropped to a hiss. What the hell are you saying? I didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact. I'm talking about responsibility, I said, and security. If Nathan is serious about this business, and if you actually believe in him, then there should be no problem signing the agreement. My mother winced, as if I'd said something unspeakable. You can't expect us to mortgage the house, she whispered. We've lived there our entire lives. So have I said. My whole life I lived in that house, but never once was it really mine. I was treated like a visitor, like a burden, like someone who should be grateful for scraps. If you want my money, then I want something of equal value in return. Nathan looked like the words had knocked the wind out of him. I didn't think you'd be so calculating, he said. I tilted my head, a slight smirk on my lips. That's your problem, I replied. You don't calculate. You don't plan. You just expect someone else to carry the risk for you. But I'm not that person anymore, Nathan. I'm not the daughter who gives without limits. I'm not the sister who sacrifices without asking questions. I'm not the woman who believes loyalty means handing over pieces of herself. Not anymore. You lost me. My father's hand slammed against the table, the sound echoing across the small, dim restaurant. His water glass tipped over, spilling across the linen tablecloth. You're ungrateful, he shouted. All you care about is yourself. What kind of person are you? Then the words landed like a blade. You're not my daughter anymore. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I stood up slowly, brushed the spilled water off the sleeve of my coat, and looked him straight in the eye. That's your decision, I said. And honestly, it's a convenient one. Because the truth is, I've never felt like your daughter in that house. Not once. Not when you ignored me. Not when you made me invisible. Not when you only remembered me when you needed something. I turned and walked past them, past their frozen stares, past the untouched plates and the empty words. I didn't look back, because what I left behind wasn't a family. It was a performance I had outgrown. And the worst part, they didn't lose me that night. They lost me years ago. They just never noticed. This is what freedom feels like. I thought they might come back. Try to beg, try to bargain. But they didn't. After that night, the night my father told me I was no longer his daughter, my entire family went silent, as if I had never existed. No calls, No messages. No one knocking at my door, pretending to care. And the truth? I didn't need them to. 3 months passed. Summer faded into early fall. The leaves outside my apartment window turned golden, and I began to breathe in ways I never knew were possible. My apartment, once empty, now felt warm. Not because of luxury, but because of peace. A few secondhand treasures filled the space. A walnut bookshelf, a tiny dining table that only seated two, and a moss green armchair I found at a weekend market. One I loved more than anything my mother had ever wrapped with a bow. Each morning had its own rhythm now. I woke early, jogged around Harriet Park, watching the sun rise in silence. Came home, brewed coffee, turned on a podcast, and logged into work from my quiet little kitchen. There were no demands, no guilt, no unspoken debts waiting at the end of the day. For the first time, life felt light. Not empty, not lonely, just mine. Epilogue. She didn't leave them. She chose herself. Sierra didn't leave because she was cruel. She didn't walk away because she hated them. She walked away because staying meant slowly erasing herself. She spent years trying to earn a seat at the table, only to realize that sometimes the people closest to you can treat you like a stranger in your own life. So she built a new one. Quiet, simple, whole. And the most beautiful part? She didn't need applause or permission or proof she was right. All she needed was to choose herself for the first time. And maybe that's the message in all of this. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining and start living. Even if it means walking away from people who were never willing to meet you where you stood. Even if it means building from nothing. Because peace, when it's real, is worth everything it costs. So if you've ever felt like Sierra, like the one who was expected to give without being seen, who was only remembered when needed, who never got to be the favorite, let this story be your reminder. You don't have to earn love by breaking yourself to fit someone else's mold. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who never learned how to value you in the first place. You are allowed to choose your own quiet. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to stop waiting for them to love you right. Sierra didn't abandon her family. She just stopped abandoning herself. And sometimes that's not cold. That's courage. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.